Okay, so let's see. Yay! Okay. Let's see if you guys can see the video because I see it on Zoom. Okay, maybe it'll just take a second for it to show up here. Let's see. Oh, there we are. Okay. There we are. Okay. All right. So crazy enough. And I got all these lights behind me and it's so not the best. All right. So welcome. This is you're getting me a little frazzled this morning. I was in the middle of a phone call and we lost power. And if we lose power where we live, because our house is the only house that pulls from a main power line for the city of Midland. And we never lose power. And when we do, it's a serious issue. Like it's thousands of people are without power. So this power line has two backup. So it's basically 3 lines. So if it gets triggered once, it has to get triggered 3 times before we lose power. And so when we lose power, it's a big issue. There's multiple people. So yeah, so welcome to Crazy July 9th live training. And so ironically, we were talking about, good morning, Maria. We were talking about, intro to brand. Look at my hair is all cuckoo because I was outside trying to figure out if there was a tree down or something on the line. We're talking about brand and we're talking like one of the key things I'm just going to jump right in. Look, I'm red from embarrassment. And I'm also hot because it's like really hot outside and now there was no AC. So, right, you have to be on message. Like you have to kind of know when you're talking about brand and your brand that you have to be authentic. And for those of you that are new, yeah, welcome to my craziness right now. But you're going to get the authentic me, and that's part of my brand as an individual and as a coach. It's my brand that I try and do with the Women's Business Resource community, as well as inside the Space Group, that we just have to kind of own ourselves. And if we try and pretend we are somebody we are not within our brand, guess what happens? It backfires. It will come back to bite us because we cannot keep up the facade forever. And especially when we are under crises mode. And so and now as we're talking, I'm getting all these alerts from consumers and from Spectrum that all this stuff is down. So they've obviously got us back up. I don't know if everybody is back up, but we are back up. And so, right, so when we are talking about brand management, you want to make sure as you are moving forward and creating your brand or refining your brand that it is authentic. Because there is going to be times like today, and this is seriously, I'm going to be really honest, this is a first world issue with not having power, right? We have to be grateful that we live in a place where we have electricity and we feel that it is the norm, that this is just expected, when there are millions around the world that electricity is not a given, right? It is something to be grateful for. So we have to just roll with these things and you just got to run with it. So yeah, so we're talking brand management. And for those that don't know me, I'm Karen Kleinwort and I host this group, the Small Business Strategies and Solutions Group for Women-Owned Businesses. And my passion is truly empowering each and every one of you to be successful, to stand in your power, to feel the confidence to be able to move forward and see your dreams come into reality. And so I offer these free trainings every Tuesday morning as a way for me to connect with you and you to connect with me. So then you also get tools, strategies that hopefully you can take and implement in your business, whether it is real time this week or whether it is something that you take away and when you are ready for it, you can go, oh yeah, Karen did this training on intro to brand management. I'm going to go back and rewatch it. So, so that is kind of who I am. And that's what we're up against today. And I say up against because my prep time went into crises mode. So I am somewhat prepared for this, but somewhat not prepared. i.e. you au natural, no earrings, no nothing, just me and my jean shorts and t-shirt. Literally, that's what I'm standing here. So, okay, brand management. Where do we start? How many of you, let's kind of get a feel for who's watching. Hi, Sue. And who's tuning in. Where are you at with your brand as far as knowing who you are as a brand, not just as an individual, but your business, who you are as a brand? What is your brand essence? What is your messaging? Who is your market, your target market? Who is it that's going to resonate with you? And how are you sharing and expressing that? Where are you guys at with that? And, we're kind of going to start with something, not with the visual piece, right? Because we know and we think branding is the visual, like our logo and our colors and our font styles and that consistency. And that's just one element of it, right? Our branding is bigger than that. It's part of who we are. It's how we share and speak and connect with people, right? Because our brand is a visualization, a expression of our values. So where's everybody at? You want to share? Like, do you guys have your kind of messaging down? You know your target market, who you're speaking to. Is it resonating? Are you getting the feedback that you want? Feeling like I know what my brand is. Awesome. So I'm going to put my hair up now because now I'm getting hot and sweaty. So Susan, where are you? My phone's over here, so I keep looking over there if you're asking. Where are you at with what your brand is? Like, outside of the visual, your messaging, have you been able to see some great results with the messaging that you're doing with your marketing, right? Because branding isn't just marketing, it's bigger than that. But when we're talking messaging, that is part of our marketing process. I'm just going to wait to see, because sometimes there's a delay from what I see and then when people text or comment. So we're going to start with the values piece. And we've talked about values before. We've discussed core values. We've discussed our brand principles. And this is where it starts to be pulled together and packaged. So we have what we call is almost like a brand packaging, where it's kind of your go-to, like you'll see it in Canva. That's the visual piece where you're branding and you have this whole, colors and font styles that you save. So for you, this is more about what is your core messaging? What are it's almost like a brief, like an overview. So what are the things that drive you and that you want your message to relay and convey as you're sharing your content? So a lot of self-reflection. We want to make sure that we're saying and we're checking in values, our principles. How is that reflective in our brand messaging? Okay, so let's see, Maria. I'm tweaking, so figuring out things as far as the messaging part of it. So Susan is saying, starting to make sure my voice and brand comes through everything I put out there. Oh, and happy belated birthday to your daughter, by the way. Susan's daughter had her birthday the other day. So yes, catch the replay. Okay, so, right, so, and this is something, so Maria's saying, she's still tweaking and figuring out the messaging piece. And I want to reassure all of you, whether you're here live or catching the replay, that your messaging will continue to be tweaked as you move forward. Because as you mature and as your business matures, you start to gain clarity. And with that clarity, you start to say, this is how I need to articulate this piece of my business, because that's what's going to resonate with my potential customers and my clients, and from a lead generation perspective, right? So I got a little pookie thing going on. Right? So you want to make sure that you're always kind of doing that self-reflection Set up a time every 4 to 6 months to kind of say, has anything changed? Has any major life change happen or impact me that might impact my values and my principles? And you might think, Karen, no, nothing so big would ever impact my values. My values are my values, and my principles are my principles, right? And I'm going to say, yes, you're absolutely right. But it's still really good to check in, because guess what happens with major life changes? And I'll use myself as an example, right? I was single, never thought I'd get married, kind of thought I'd have children, right? Then guess what? I'm in corporate. I meet my husband, we get married, we have a family. Immediately, what's going to impact my priorities and my values and my principles? My children, my husband, my family, right? All of a sudden, family becomes a higher on my principles and values list, because before children, before a husband, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, and my parents are super important. But I'm making decisions about me as an adult woman that don't impact anybody else, because my decisions don't impact my parents per se, or my sister, because they're independents, right? So, but now I have dependents, so my decisions impact directly other people. So all of a sudden, your values do shift, right? So you start a business and you grow and you have a team now of 3, 4, 5 people. Your values won't shift, your principles won't shift, but how they impact your decision making switches and changes. And that's why it's important for you to be checking in and doing that self-reflection on a regular basis, because as you bring on team members, how you communicate is going to be different, right? What does that look like? So self-reflection is number one. Constantly kind of I would say, I try and recommend to my clients every 6 months, we just do a quick analysis. What's changed? What hasn't changed? It's kind of like, when you do your life insurance every year, right? You kind of check in, what's changed? Do I need to adjust my life insurance? That's kind of the same MO, right? You also want to be doing when you're talking about values, because you're talking about your strengths and your areas that you're the problem solver, right? You want to also check in with your competitors. Who else is, and I know people hate using that word, right? There's more than enough going on. I get it, but you still have to check in to see who else is doing what you do. Who else is doing something similar to you? And understanding, what are they really good at? What are their areas of weakness? Where do you see yourself in alignment with them? Are you both doing the exact same thing? Or are their areas of weakness your areas of strength? Are their areas of strength your areas of weakness? What does that look like? You want to know, because it's going to affect your messaging. Because where there's a gap in your competition that you fill, you want to be able to articulate that, right? So, and then, because that impacts your unique selling proposition, right? Your USP, your value proposition. So you want to make sure, as you're reflecting, as you're kind of doing this review of what is your brand, how is it being articulated, what's propping it up from a values and a principles perspective, and is it flowing from the inside out? Because remember, we're not talking about the visual piece yet. We're talking about how your values impact your decision making, how they impact your communication within your internal teams and your external teams, so those that work for you and those that you contract out, right? So understanding that, you want to make sure you're in alignment with it. Because if your internal people haven't bought into your brand, the values, the principles, then they're going to have a really hard time completing what you're asking them to do. If they are not all in with those values and those principles of the brand, then they're not going to be able to represent your brand as well or at all. So this is why when you are going through that hiring process, you are going through the contractual phase of bringing on an independent person, contractor to work with you, they need to be buying into your brand messaging, share the values that your brand and you have, and have an agreement about the principles, right? Because if they aren't, they're not going to be able to stay on company message, right? So again, this is about being authentic, and your internal people, as well as those that you contract with, need to be on brand when they're having those conversations with others, if they are representing your brand to a third party, say, right? So it's super important that those values are in alignment with everybody. So, and your values can also help from a competitor perspective. If your values are XYZ and your competitors are ABC, but the client is looking for what, that's going to depend on who they end up going with, right? So clearly having your values intertwined with your presentation, your messaging becomes important, which leads us right into that, right? Into your target audience, into your brand messaging. How do you articulate it? What are the benefits? How are you discussing the benefits? Because when you're talking about brand message, you want clarity so people understand exactly who you are and what you're doing, where you're going, because they want to get on board, right? Your perfect client is going to say, I want to get on board with that person or that company because they're in alignment with me. They share some values and I can see their values coming through in their messaging. Okay. It's going to be an ongoing scenario. So just like Maria had mentioned, right? She is still working on the messaging. This is going to be like an A-B approach, where as you're crafting your message based on the benefits you offer, your strengths, your solutions you offer your target audience, that with the messaging, you're going to say, I'm going to try it this way using this verbiage. And then I'm going to try it this way using a different type of verbiage to see what resonates, to see what grabs their attention. Okay. I'm just going to check to make sure my phone isn't off. So does that make sense? Like your brand messaging is not going to be perfect the first time. It's not going to be perfect in 6 months because you are going to need to keep tweaking it. And you're going to learn what resonates and what doesn't. And if life happens for people, then the verbiage you're using today may not still be applicable in 6 months from now. Because if there's been a change, an impact on your target audience, and your brand messaging hasn't kept up with that situation, then people are going to feel out of alignment. They're going to feel like maybe you're not living and speaking your values. So, and we can use, right? We can flip the calendar back 4 years. It wasn't very long ago, right? When the pandemic hit and everything shut down, and not just in our local area, but worldwide, like it completely shifted everything for us as humans. And so with that, guess what happened to every corporate brand person? Their job immediately went into high gear because now they had to shift their brand messaging to stay in alignment with their values, but meet the situation of where it is. So for you, if you're having a product-based company and you have a local, so if your demographic is a local demographic where you don't ship or sell out of your geographic area, then the local situation, what's happening for you in your community, may have a direct impact on your messaging, and you want to match it. So, you know, our thoughts and prayers are with all of those that are being affected by the Hurricane Beryl right now. And so the messaging for those companies in Texas or that service Texas, what do you think they're doing? If they live their values, they are adjusting their brand messaging to continue to support the local economy, the individuals, the citizens of Texas, to make sure that they remember us as a company because we were there for them and we are living our values and they're following through. So this is how, right, when we start looking at your brand messaging, you need to be flexible in what you're saying and how you're saying it, but creative to make sure you're staying on brand and in alignment with your values and principles. So crafting your message comes down to really knowing who your target is, where they are, and what types of terms they resonate with. The bases will stay the same, but how it's packaged and delivered is going to shift based on other external forces, right? So, because obviously priorities for people change, right? And we can use a hurricane as a very prime present day example that all those immediately being affected, guess what happened to their values? They got switched up, right? Because now all of a sudden survival became number one. Family, right? Safety, like all of a sudden things shifted and kind of was putting the pot shook up, and it's like, okay, like what do we need to be doing, right? So thinking of that, how then do you adjust? And you want to make sure that you keep refining that message based on the engagement and feedback. So, and I can use myself as an example, right? So a year ago, March, we launched the Village platform, but that's not what it was called. It was, we didn't have a name, right? And over the course of a year, it took tweaking and using different language before we hit what really resonated with people, the women, right? Women business owners, they're looking for community. They're looking for their business BFFs. They're looking for somebody that they can go to and ask questions and lean on to help give them direction and guidance. And so, and our belief, right? One of our principles is community. And so our belief is that it takes a village to build a thriving and flourishing business. And so out of that, that's where the Village, or the Village platform came from. Being a neighbor, right? Come be our neighbor, because that's the messaging. That's what we as women are looking for. We're looking for that closeness, that bonding. And yes, there's competition, but it's more collaborative, right? That's what we are looking for as women business owners. So crafting your message, be patient with yourself and keep tweaking, lean into the group, right? Post what your current message is, what your current statement is, and get feedback, right? Describe your target audience. Like my target audience is women between 35 and I'm just not accurate, but 35 and 55, and they live in the state X, Y, and Z because I sell this product, and this is what my messaging base is, and get feedback. Okay, because that's how you're going to use it as a test subject in the group. So you can kind of be testing some of your language, so that way you know what's going to work with your target market and what isn't. So that way, before you kind of go out into the general population, you can get feedback and at least kind of get the initial one refined. Okay, so values, self-reflecting, understanding where your strength is versus where your competitor's strength is, so you can fill that gap, understanding what your unique selling proposition is, understanding what your values are and how that's portrayed inside your USP, knowing your benefits, knowing the value you bring with those benefits, right? And this all blends into your brand personality, right? So we think of our business as its own entity. So I am Karen, but my brand has its own personality. It's a reflection of me, but in the end, it becomes to take on its own energy, its own persona. And that, knowing that persona, knowing that personality, allows us to express it in our messaging to ensure that it resonates with the right people, right? So for you, it's like, what is your brand personality? It's going to be reflective of you. It may not be identical to you, and that's okay. So understanding what that brand personality is. Where do you draw inspiration from as an individual? So when you're looking at that personality, where is something, or what is something that inspires you? Where did you find it? Was it on a TikTok? Was it on Pinterest? Was it on Instagram? Was it a Facebook story? So start to identify, where do you find inspiration? Because by default, that inspiration is going to flow through you and into your messaging and out to your target market and your potential clients and customers, right? So, but this is why, if we kind of roll back in the very beginning, when I got online and I was all frazzled because I'd lost power and yada, 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 right? And I kind of warned all you new people, like, this is welcome to, first world problems, crazy Karen sometimes, right? Because you're going to get the real me on these. This isn't, because I can't maintain a persona that isn't who I am. And this is what flows through when I'm working with my private clients and doing the group coaching inside the platform. So if you're not authentic and where you draw inspiration from, then you will not be authentic when you try to provide inspiration to your potential customers and clients. And that's why understanding your values is so important, because it's what's going to drive that authenticity, right? And your messaging, when we're talking visuals, we're talking consistency and it being cohesive. So cohesive meaning that if you're on different platforms, is there a commonality between your content? Is there similarity between all of your posts on Instagram or your videos on TikTok? So it becomes immediately recognizable. Your inspiration is going to drive that cohesiveness. Okay, so if you are inspired by, we'll just say, funny cat memes, right? Because it's laughter, and part of your brand personality is wit and fun and laughter. Then the funny cat memes, maybe where you draw inspiration from, how does that get portrayed across your brand? Right? So what are the visuals that you're using? Is it the same type of imagery? The lightness versus darkness, right? If you gear towards women, is it all women in your imagery, or is it split based on who your demographic is? So we can talk about logos. Your logo is that visual, iconic representation of your brand, of what your business provides. It conveys who you are in a millisecond. So when they look at your brand, your icon, your logo, your potential clients, do they understand what it is? Do they get a feeling for who you are and that they want to resonate and be a part of that? So the Get Savvy logo is basically kind of 4 people with this diamond in the center. So when you look at it, immediately people see community. They see support, right? And through that support and community, they get a sense of empowerment and they want to be part of a community. So what we've done is we've taken that icon, and with each different element, we've taken a portion of it to be integrated. So that way there's that continuity. So they start to see the subtext within the bigger visual icon. Cohesiveness, colors. 2 main colors, an accent color. What drives your choice of colors? Where you draw inspiration from? What's your favorite color? Right? So whatever your visual icons are, you want to make sure that it's duplicatable in black and white and grayscale. Makes it for easy producing when you have to print product, like materials, marketing materials, or get it branded on something, right? So you want to make sure from that black and white, then you're adding your color. And from your color, then that further reinforces who and what you are as a brand, what your brand messaging is, right? Your font. What's your font look like? Does it, if you're a fun, witty company who loves cat memes, does your font play into that? And is it readable? There's some funky fonts out there. And some of them just are not readable, depending upon what words you're using. So you want to be aware of that when you're choosing your fonts, right? Because that visual, it's fun. There's some really fun fonts out there, but they're just not usable for most of the words if I were to ever try and use them. Because people would go, what does that say? I can't read it. It looks funny, but I don't understand, right? And then you've lost them. So you want to make sure as you're creating that visual, so especially now when you're getting to content creation and you're doing a visual and you're adding font, that people can read it. Because if they get frustrated when they're reading your font, they're going to just keep scrolling. They're not going to stop, right? Even if they like the image, you'll lose them at the font. So understanding where you get inspiration from, it will inspire you to inspire others. And that's not just with the visual, but through your fonts and your colors. Okay, so questions about anything we've spoken about. I'm just going to scroll up and make sure I haven't. So yeah, you get me up close when I have to go to my phone. Okay. Questions, thoughts, ideas. Anybody want to share what their current messaging is? Anything about their own branding? Because this is interactive, right? It's not just me being a talking head. Okay, Maria says, how can I incorporate your be bilingual savvy under my original brand? I don't know what your original brand is. So, because is that your URL, Maria? I think that's your URL, right? I'm just waiting because sometimes it takes a minute for the comments to come up. But you might have to look at what that original brand is and start to dissect it. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So you may not be able to get your URL, like, because it's kind of long. You may not be able to get it all into your brand. What's your logo? Can you describe your logo? Is that what, because you want that into with your logo? And then do you have a tagline that's kind of like I know for the women's business resource community, like we're working on creating a tag, right? Kind of like a statement and like, so it's kind of like 3 to 5 words. So what's your, like, kind of what's your branding right now? I'll see what I don't know, she might be able to post an image or something, but So when you start looking, so from a branding perspective, your URL is kind of one of those elements that isn't in the actual visual brand itself. So it's one of those, like, it's at the bottom of your letterhead, it's at the top of your Facebook profile or Instagram profile or link in bio kind of thing. And it's added. So if you're looking at doing, if we're looking at, say, just an Instagram post, you would have your logo, your icon, and then your URL kind of just typed out somewhere on the image. So people, if it gets shared, anybody who sees it can find your URL. So yeah, so with that, I'm not sure without seeing it how you might be able to manipulate your current branding to get that URL in there. Yeah, so because you'd have to think about, right? So when we choose, so this is just actually another good topic because we're talking about the visual, about your brand. One of the things you want to be doing is looking at what is that URL and how is it aligned with your brand. And, there's certain parameters, like Google really likes shorter, less than like 6 to 8 characters, 9 at the most, as far as in your URL, like they like because they don't get cut off that way. So how does your URL represent your brand? So our URL is getbizsavvy.com, right? And we chose it on purpose. It won't let me share my current brand. Okay. So yeah, so you'd have to just kind of look, Maria, how to dissect it. And so our URL has our name, the Get Savvy, in it, right? So, but it also stands in itself. So for us, we don't have to kind of worry about the name versus the brand, even though we're looking at URLs because of the village, right? And the Women's Business Resource Community. But right now it's getbizsavvy.com, and it's still in line with who we are as a brand. So the Be Bilingual Savvy is a kind of a play on words statement. And so if you're going to get it into your brand, just thinking off the top of my head, then you would have to separate it. You wouldn't put it out forward, right? So you would have to separate it into like just the letter B and then bilingual and savvy. So 3 separate. But people are going to hear B as in the word BE. So they might try and type in BE, bilingual savvy, if they hear it and they don't see it. So that's something to consider as well, right? And I understand, like, the B is a play on your last name too, right? Borden. So to me, it makes sense. I can see the connection. So you're just going to have to kind of work on using the word bilingual in most of your marketing materials and everything that you're doing from a branding perspective, right? Because if somebody's searching the word savvy, they're not thinking language, right? So but when they hear the word bilingual, oh, okay. Sorry, now I just saw her comment. So you're asking the wrong question. I was wanting to make the URL like an umbrella company. Oh, so you're talking the hierarchical structure of your business. So that's something, that is something that you are going to want to talk to your tax accountant about, to make sure, or your bookkeeper or your certified accountant, whoever you work with to do your business taxes, to make sure that you set that structure up properly. Because if you want Be Bilingual Savvy to be your, for lack of a better word, your LLC, and then all your other elements from underneath, talk to them to make sure you're setting it up correctly. Because everybody's a little bit different. And it's based on your personal situation, right? How you're currently set up, et cetera, et cetera. So talk to somebody, either whoever you're working with, or find somebody to be able to help you set up the structure properly, because they're going to want to kind of dive in and ask you certain questions. It can be done. It can be done. You can do it. You just need to make sure you have the right expert to talk to, right? I guide my clients, but I recommend them all to go and talk to an accountant when they're finalizing their business structure, because it's too important to mess up. So yeah, and you're going to want to think about how that, right? So when you're talking about marketing materials and messaging, the word bilingual is going to be super important, because it's essentially what you do, right? Everything about it is about being bilingual and teaching language. So yeah, but good question. So we kind of got a little sidetracked, but URL question is a good question, because she was thinking about it from a different perspective. But for us as a visual, you want to give some thought into your URL for sure, and how that plays into your brand and the messaging, right? Not all of us are fortunate enough to be able to have the exact URL as to our name, especially now. So many years, so many people have URLs that they're not using. They're just sitting on them, waiting for somebody to come and offer to buy them, right? So, so you're going to want to think about that. And it's okay if your URL is not exactly the same as your name, as long as it plays into your brand messaging and is identifiable for your audience. Okay, so quick recap. We talked about values, self-reflection every 6 months or so, to make sure that things have not changed for you or your business where it could impact how your values are shifting or your principles are shifting, that could impact your decision-making, right? So again, it's not going to be huge changes, but there might be enough that it could impact your decision-making. So you want to just kind of do a little self-reflection. You want to review who your competitors are, where their strengths are, where their weaknesses are, where your strengths, where your weaknesses are, and where you fill the gaps, because that is part of your brand essence, right? It's part of your unique selling proposition. Then we talked about knowing and understanding your target audience, because when you're talking brand messaging, you want to be speaking to that audience, right? You want to make sure in your messaging, you're going over what benefits you offer, what value proposition you offer, right? So when you understand the competition and where your audience is, you can fill the gap to funnel them towards you, because you're speaking their language, right? So as you're crafting that message, you're going to want to do A/B testing all the time. You want to be tweaking it until you find the right message that truly resonates and gets the strongest feedback, positive feedback. And again, when you're refining your values and doing that check-in, you're going to double check on your messaging to make sure it's still in alignment with who you are as a brand, and it's still speaking to your brand values, right? And then we kind of got into the brand personality, and that is the visual presentation. Oh, my computer is about to die, right? Your brand presentation, your brand personality, and where you're finding inspiration and how that fuels you to inspire others, making sure that you're cohesive within what you're communicating, both visually and in text, across platforms and within the same platform. So is the visual consistent? Is what you're sharing on one platform consistent with another? Does not have to be identical, but there needs to be consistency. If somebody finds you on Facebook, then sees you on TikTok, and it's a completely different look and feel, they're going to go, how authentic are they? Who is the real person, right? Who is the real brand, right? Kind of like the whole, anyways. So you understand what I'm talking about, right? So you want to be cohesive. You want to be consistent. You want to be authentic, because this is how we started out, right? So I'm showing up as I am because I had no power, which is why my computer is almost dying, right? But I'm showing up, and I'm going to show you my true self, because that's what's important, because your brand has to stand on its own. It has to stand true to its values, and it is an extension of who you are. And the same can be said for the big Fortune 500, right? Like their brand values are representative of who their stakeholders are, because that's who they're speaking to. So it's not just for us little guys to hold that brand value in importance. Okay, questions. I'm just going to check my. All right, I've got about 17% left on my computer. So questions, comments, feedback, helpful, not helpful. Karen, go back to the drawing board type thing. I'm okay with that too. So I'm just waiting. Hi, Lauren, I see you. Okay. No questions. I'll just double check. If not, then we will be good. And we will call it a morning. And I truly appreciate all of you being here today. I hope you had a wonderful long weekend. Oh, great. Thanks, Marie. I'm glad it was helpful for you. Last week was an amazing week for me to be kind of somewhat unplugged. And it was just nice to hang out with my sister and her family and having our families together for the week. So we are back at it. Tomorrow is the Biz 101 workshop. I will have a link for that. And then we are going to, I almost forgot, the Lunch and Learns, we are going to hit pause for July and August just because summer is busy, and it's just, we want to make sure that we are prioritizing family time and summertime. Well, especially for us when, we kind of go through winters where we're not always able to get outside. So we will resume the Lunch and Learns in September, and there will be likely some changes coming to that. I've got some ideas brewing that I think will be fun. So, all right. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate you. And if you're in the Midland area, hopefully you got power back. And you guys stay safe. Anybody in Texas right now, be safe. And we're thinking of you all. And you guys have a beautiful day. Thanks for joining us. And we will see you next Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern for the next live training. And I'll be better prepared. Hopefully I won't have lost power. All righty. Okay. Have a great day, everybody.